In this video, we're going to talk about how to run for office, and here's the good news. It has never been easier to do than it is right now. There has never been a greater need for people to run for office and help fix the problems in this democracy. You're in the right place. In this video, I'm going to show you how it's done and how you can kickstart your own political campaign. I'm going to start with a fundamental truth about running for office that you should know at the outset. We'll talk about how you develop a strong network of supporters, how to put together a campaign message, how to plan an advertising campaign, and then how you raise the money to pay for it. Stick with me. Here is a fundamental truth about running for office. You may talk about providing service to people and being an attentive listener, but voters also know that when you run for office, you are asking for power, because every political office in the land offers a certain amount of power to the office holder to do the job they were elected to do. If you do not know why it is that you want the job, if a voter asks you why you're running and you do not have a coherent answer, they're not going to regard you well. They're going to tell you to go home and give that some thought, and rightly so. If you're running for an office and talking about a certain amount of problems you want to fix, and that has nothing to do with the power of the office you're seeking, voters are going to see a disconnect and they're going to be very suspicious of your motivation. So, know a problem that you want to fix and run for an office that gives you the power to fix that problem. And I say this is fundamental because I've seen so many mismatches of candidates who were clueless or candidates who were not running for the right office to fix the problems they were talking about, and it really threw a monkey wrench into their campaign. In fact, I want to tell you a short story about a candidate who once called me from Pennsylvania. We'd talked a few times, and he said, "Jay, I've got a dilemma here. We've got an open U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. We have an open governor's race, and I can't decide which office I should run for. What do you think?" Now, because we'd talked and I've heard him talk about problems that he wanted to fix, I kind of knew the answer, but I didn't tell him the answer. I just said, "Well, let me ask you a few questions." I said, "Mark, take out a piece of paper and write down the top 5 problems that you want to fix." And he did. He could name them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I said, "Now, Mark, let me ask you, of each of these problems that you want to fix, who can solve that problem, a governor or a U.S. senator?" And we went through them one by one, and his answer on every one was, "Only a governor can fix this problem." And I said, "Okay, Mark, does this answer your question?" And he said, "Yes, thank you very much." The second piece of running for office is that you will need a campaign message. Now, part of that campaign message is why you want the power that comes with the job, the problem that you are going to fix, the injustice that you want to correct, or the wrong you want to right, or the policy that you want to pursue that will improve the quality of life in your jurisdiction. But there are other components of your campaign message, and I'm going to mention them because you do need to give them some thought. Voters want to know your qualifications. They want to know that you're qualified to do the job that you are running for. Basically, when they're asking for your qualifications, they want to know that you got your feet on the ground, that you've done something real, that you may have walked in the shoes of other people who live in your jurisdiction, that you're relatable, that you're committed to your community. So anything you can say about civic organizations that you have served, where you earned your degree, or the education you have, or your community involvement, will kind of fill in the blanks, and they'll know your sincerity when they see that. The second thing voters will ask you is, how do I know that your moral code and your set of fundamental values is in sync with my fundamental values? Do you care about children? Do you care about injustice? Do you care about veterans? Do you care about our schools? It's incumbent upon you during the course of the campaign to let voters know that your values and your priorities and the problems you want to fix are in sync with theirs. I already talked about the to-do part of your campaign message, but there are a couple of other components here that you need to be mindful of. Voters are very cynical about people who run for office in this day and age. They think all politicians are bad. Fundamentally, it's about trust when they go into the voting booth. Do they trust what you've said? Now, you can enhance that trust that they can express by voting for you by telling them about some event in your life, some experience you had, something you saw or heard that made you passionate about fixing at least one of the problems that you're running to fix. That's your way of letting voters know they can trust you to do the right thing when they're not looking. And finally, in most campaigns, it comes down to voters having a choice between two different people. It is incumbent upon you in your campaign message to let voters know why you are the better choice as opposed to your opponent. Why you, not them. If you can give that message to voters with absolute clarity, you make their job easier, and it's easier for them to click that box and say, okay, I've made my decision about this one. The third thing I'll talk about here is the importance of your network. You probably already have one and you don't know it, but here is this fundamental truth about running for office, especially for the first time. No one ever does this by themselves. You cannot be elected to office without the help of other people. You will need volunteers. Where do you go to find volunteers? Well, let's start with your existing network. Who are the people that know you and like you? What about your family and your friends and your relatives? Where do you go to find all of these people you know? Well, one place to look is your contact list on your mobile phone. Chances are that there are people on that list that you've forgotten that you know. Check your Facebook friends. There may be people on there that you knew from college or a previous job or some community organization that you served in. It's okay to call them and ask them to do something to help you in your campaign. This is the way you develop a personal network that you'll need. And one other place I might suggest here is check your LinkedIn connections, because sometimes there are people there who can be helpful to you in your community. That's how you do it. When you're running for office, especially the first time, one of the first things you do is come up with a list of people who can be helpful to you. The next thing is fundamental, and if you've run before, you already know this, but if you haven't, please pay close attention. You need to know the rules. If you're going to run for office, you need to know what it takes to get on the ballot. Some jurisdictions make it very hard for people to do that. I live in a state where it's very difficult for challengers to get on the ballot. So check the rules and know what the requirements are so that you don't miss some silly deadline that comes along to get your name on the ballot. The second set of rules you need to know is, as you raise money in your campaign, many jurisdictions have hard, fast rules about when you are to report those campaign contributions, how much you're allowed to take from individuals or businesses, and they also require reports about how you spend their money, or how you spend your campaign dollars. So do not neglect that, because you're going to have a bad day when the authority looking for a campaign report says, you're 3 days late on this and I've already told reporters that you didn't file. There are a couple of other things that I'm going to mention here. We are now in a day and age where we no longer have just a one-day sale where everybody votes on election day. There are different times and places that people are allowed to vote. Mail ballots typically go out about 4 to 6 weeks before an election. You need to know who the people are who typically get a mail ballot, because when they get that ballot, they start voting. People are now allowed to vote early in many elections, usually starting 2 to 3 weeks in advance, where they can drive somewhere and vote prior to Election Day. That is a different Election Day, and of course then there is Election Day, when people show up to vote. You need to know those dates to properly strategize your campaign. I'll mention a couple of other things here before we wrap up this video, one of which is Once you know how many votes that you need to win an election, and you've given some thought to your campaign strategy and who you are going to target, you will need to advertise. Now, there are many ways to advertise and disseminate your message, and I'll touch upon a couple of them here. One is certainly you can be on social media. Typically, candidates use Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube to disseminate their message. YouTube and Facebook allow you to precision target people with your campaign messages. It is relatively inexpensive to do it that way, and it's a very handy tool in your arsenal, something you want to do regardless of other mediums you are using. Candidates also commonly use what we call persuasion mail. They use digital advertising. Some candidates find radio and newspaper ads extremely useful. There are 4 different kinds of television ads that you can do: OTT, CTV, cable TV, and commercial television. All of those get factored in because they all have a cost. And what you want to do in your campaign is figure out the cheapest and most expensive way to get a message to someone that will vote for you if they get your message. I'm going to also mention here the importance of a campaign budget and a fundraising plan. Complicated campaigns, and those campaigns that are more than just knocking on a few doors and hoping they vote for you, you must have budget discipline. Because if you do not have a budget, you do not have a strategy. If you do not stick to that budget, you'll spend way too much money way too early in the campaign, and it will come at the expense that you have in the account to spend money when voters are making up their minds during the last 6 weeks of an election. So craft that budget, stick to that budget, and finally here, you need to figure out a way to fund that advertising program and the money for staff that you have in that budget. There are many ways to raise money in a political campaign. There is a link to a different video in the description of this YouTube video that goes into great detail about how to raise money in a political campaign. I would suggest that you watch that because it rounds out your knowledge of how this is done. This is how you run for office. This should be very useful to you. If you have any questions, put it in the comments section. I will answer your question and get back to you.